Are we streaming now? Yeah. Good evening and welcome. It is now 6:30 and the May 24th, 2021 City of Cuyahoga Falls Council meeting is now called to order. Ms. Capriola, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Balthus?
Here.
Mr. Brohart?
Here.
Mr. Gorbach?
Here.
Mr. Ayula?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Ms. Loza?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Nichols Rhodes?
Here.
Mrs. Penta?
Here.
Mrs. Spinner?
Here.
Mr. Stams?
Here.
Thank you. The records will show that everyone is in attendance, all members. We will now have the invocation by Mrs. Spinner.
Thank you. Dear God, as we gather here today as members of City Council, we pray that we are ever mindful of the opportunities to render our service to our fellow citizens and our neighbors. Accept our thanks for this day and all its blessings, and grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to this council, the administration, and our community. For all this we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And thank you. And we will now have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Stams. Will you please stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before you should receive the minutes from the May 10th meeting, the regular meeting, and the committee of the whole. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, they'll stand as written. Ms. Capriola, do we have any readings or petitions or claims to be read tonight?
No, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. And then we have some new ordinances. Could you please read them?
Temporary Ordinance B35, presented by the administration. An ordinance appropriating community development block grant COVID-19 funds in the amount of $233,720 for the Community Development Block Grant Fund and declaring an emergency.
Finance and Appropriations, Mr. Gorbach.
Temporary Ordinance B36, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to execute a modification of contract number 8266 with Parent Asphalt Company for the annual resurfacing and/or repair of various streets and declaring an emergency.
Finance and Appropriations, Mr. Gorbach.
Temporary Ordinance B37, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a license agreement without competitive bidding with AMP Transmission LLC for the AMPT 69 kV conversion project and declaring an emergency.
Public and Industrial Improvements, Ms. Nichols Rhodes.
Temporary Ordinance B38, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts according to law with a firm or firms for concrete pavement repairs to various streets and declaring an emergency.
Public and Industrial Improvements, Ms. Nichols Rhodes.
Temporary Ordinance B39, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a cooperative agreement with the City of Akron, Ohio, to share the cost of engineering and construction for the resurfacing of portions of Riverview Road, Akron Peninsula Road, Smith Road, and Portage Trail and declaring an emergency.
Public and Industrial Improvements, Ms. Nichols Rhodes.
Temporary Ordinance B40, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to apply for federal surface transportation block grant funds programmed by the Akron Metropolitan Area Transportation Study for the resurfacing of Broad Boulevard between State Road and 2nd Street and declaring an emergency.
Public and Industrial Improvements, Ms. Nichols Rhodes.
Temporary Ordinance B41, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Parfait Properties LLC and declaring an emergency.
Community Development, Mrs. Penta. Thank you, Ms. Capriolo. We have no public hearings and no reports of any special council committees, so we'll move right on to council standing committees. Planning and zoning, Mrs. Spinner.
Thank you. Mr. President, the Planning and Zoning Committee has one item for council to vote on tonight, temporary ordinance B15.
Temporary ordinance B15, presented by the administration upon recommendation of the Planning Commission. An ordinance approving a regulatory text amendment to table 1131-1 zoning districts and uses to allow vehicle wash/detailing as a conditional use in MU3 suburban center and MU5 urban center districts and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mr. President, the Planning and Zoning Committee voted to bring temporary ordinance B15 out for a vote this evening. I want to thank the administration for providing the requested responses to questions brought up at last week's committee meeting. I expect this will spark some further discussion tonight and could even result in amending the ordinance before our final vote. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt B15, anticipating there will be remarks before the vote.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Motion made by Mrs. Spinner, second by Mr. Miller. Are there any remarks? Mr. Balthus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to have a few remarks on temporary ordinance B15. I'm sure, as council recalls from last week, there was a lot of discussion, and I really appreciate the administration taking the time, particularly Law Director Ciatola and Community Development Director Diana Calavecchio and Adam's memo to help provide some additional guidance on these on this legislation. These kind of zoning matters can be complicated, so I appreciate them taking the time and helping me get up to speed and to fully understand what this ordinance does. And I thought it might be helpful to kind of just quickly recap what the ordinance currently does. And I would like to make an amendment to amend temporary ordinance B15, which I'll get into here in a moment and explain why. Just to kind of quickly summarize the legislation as it stands before us now, it's to make a regulatory text amendment to our zoning code to allow car washes with a conditional use permit in the MU3 and MU5 districts. The reason behind this legislation and Planning Commission's approval and recommendation for us to pass it is that there has been interest raised in developing a car wash at the current location of McCready's Tire and Auto, which is in an MU5 district. So when I look at this, I think that the proposed or the discussed location of McCready's, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's bordered by, the district itself is bordered by the river. It's bordered by Route 8. And as I looked at our maps, which again, the administration was kind enough to provide, I can see how an MU5 district does not abut residential areas. And I think that this legislation makes sense to amend the MU5 use to allow an application to go forward for a car wash with a conditional use permit at McCready's. My concern as I looked at the legislation was the MU3 districts. A number of the MU3 districts abut residential or heavily residential areas. I believe Councilman Stams was kind of speaking to some of these concerns in the committee meeting last week, and I agreed with his concerns. And I think that it makes sense to amend temporary ordinance B15 to remove MU3 districts so that the end result would be we would not permit car washes in MU3s, but allow them to apply for a conditional use permit in MU5s. And I think the reason for this is it puts the city in a better position to protect residential areas, which I know is important and an important part of our code. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to amend temporary resolution B15 by removing the words in line 11, MU-3 suburban center and. So therefore, it would then end up reading wash detail as a conditional use in MU5 urban center districts. And in addition, in line 27, I would like to amend to remove MU-3 and then the S in columns after MU5. So then it would read conditional use symbols in the MU5 column in table 1131-1, and then corresponding amendments to the exhibit to reflect that. And then I would also like to add any other amendments deemed necessary or appropriate in the opinion of the law director and within the intent of this amendment. And that is my motion, Mr. President.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to amend temporary ordinance B15. Are there any further remarks?
I just wanted to say thank you, and I agree and support the proposed amendment to this ordinance. It'll reduce the impact of car washes being built near residential neighborhoods while allowing future projects to move forward where it does make more sense in the area zoned for MU5. Thank you.
Ms. Nichols-Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too want to thank the administration and council for considering this amendment, because also I had questions too, and it was just really great that everybody was willing to take a second look to figure out what made the best sense to not have so many residential areas impacted by this legislation. So I'm very happy with this. I'm in favor of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols-Rhodes. Any further remarks?
Question.
Question has been called. Now, this is the vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment to temporary ordinance B15, please signify by saying yes.
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 Any opposed, say no. The amendment passes unanimously. Okay, we will now vote on the amended temporary ordinance B15. And I believe that one, well, we would need to have a motion and a second on that.
I move for the adoption of B15 as amended.
Second.
Are there any remarks?
No further remarks, Mr. President.
Question.
Question has been called. We have a motion made by Mrs. Spinner and a second by Mr. Miller to approve the amended temporary ordinance B15. All those in favor, please signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. The amended amended temporary ordinance B15 passes unanimously 11-0.
Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes the Planning and Zoning Committee report this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinner. Finance and Appropriations, Mr. Gorbach.
Yes, thank you. We have 4 ordinances to vote on this evening, beginning with temporary ordinance B31.
Temporary ordinance B31, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a subaward grant agreement with the Institute for Intergovernmental Research for the Comprehensive, Secure, and Responsible Drug Disposal Program in an amount not to exceed $99,774 for the purchase of drug disposal bags, and to make the necessary appropriations for the same and declaring an emergency.
The Finance Committee voted in favor of bringing temporary ordinance B31 out for a vote this evening, and I move for its adoption.
Second.
We have a motion to approve temporary ordinance B31 made by Mr. Gorbach with a second by Ms. Nichols-Rhodes. Are there any remarks?
I have none.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor of temporary ordinance B31, please signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes unanimously.
Temporary ordinance B 32, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts without competitive bidding with Atlantic Emergency Solutions, Inc. for various vehicle repairs, supplies, and equipment used by the fire department and declaring an emergency.
The Finance Committee voted in favor of temporary ordinance B32 for a vote this evening, and I move for its adoption.
Second.
Oh, sorry.
I believe Ms. Nichols Rhodes was first.
Jeff was louder.
We have a motion to approve temporary, or any remarks?
I have no remarks.
Question.
Okay, question has been called. All those in favor of approving temporary ordinance B32 with a motion made by Mr. Gorbach and a second by Ms. Nichols Rhodes, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes unanimously 11-0.
Temporary ordinance B 33, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract or contracts without competitive bidding with AT&T Corp. For the lease of public safety answering points and related equipment and software and declaring an emergency.
Finance Committee voted in favor of bringing temporary ordinance B33 out for a vote this evening, and I move for its adoption.
Second.
We have a motion to approve temporary ordinance B33 made by Mr. Gorbach with a second by Mr. Ayula. Are there any remarks?
No remarks.
Question?
Question has been called. All those in favor of temporary ordinance B33, please signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes unanimously 11-0.
Temporary ordinance B 34, presented by the administration. An ordinance authorizing the director of law to enter into a settlement agreement in the case of BW et al. Versus City of Cuyahoga Falls and declaring an emergency.
The Finance Committee voted in favor of bringing temporary ordinance B34 out for a vote this evening, and I move for its adoption.
Second?
We have a motion to approve temporary ordinance B34 made by Mr. Gorbach with a second by Ms. Nichols Rhodes. Are there any remarks?
I have no remarks.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor of temporary ordinance B34, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes unanimously.
That concludes our report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Gorbach. Public and industrial improvements, Ms. Nichols Rhodes.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Public affairs, Mr. Balthus.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Community development, Mrs. Penta.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. We will now set the schedule for the next council meeting. Now, we will be going back to regular meetings on June the 7th. That will be our meeting date. It'll be in the natatorium. And so it will be, once again, June 7th. And with that, planning and zoning, Mrs. Spinner.
Subject to call, Mr. President.
Thank you. Finance and appropriations, Mr. Gorbach.
June 7th at 6:30.
Thank you. Public and industrial improvements, Ms. Nichols Rhodes.
June 7th at 6:35 p.m.
Thank you. Public affairs, Mr. Balthus.
Subject to call.
Thank you. And community development, Mrs. Penta.
June 7th at 6:40 p.m.
Thank you. Is there any miscellaneous business to come before council?
I have something, Mr. President.
Mr. Gorbach, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make council aware. I've received a few calls, and I think maybe the calls are going to increase pretty soon once this thing goes live. But on Bath Road, there's a section, there's the Ascot Industrial Park on State Road across from the post office. That, as we know, that's Akron's Industrial Park. And what they did last year is they cut a road in leaving that industrial park going onto Bath Road. And it's a single lane that's going to be used for egress when they're doing maintenance work in that industrial park, and the state road exit won't be available. So last fall, stop signs were put up, they were taken down, then they were put up, they were taken down. And I think this happened 3 times. And I received a few calls about it then, and they came down and didn't come back and thought maybe that went away. Well, they're back up. And I want to thank Tony DeMasi. This is not a City of Cuyahoga Falls project. It's not on City of Cuyahoga Falls property. And our engineering department has nothing to do with this project. In fact, it's really professionally and ethically not responsible for Tony to comment on it. He's not done any engineering work on it himself. But I want to thank him. He did make a call to the engineer in Akron for me to get some information, which is what I'm passing on to you tonight. So it seems that these stop signs are going to go live here. It could be in the next couple weeks. And I think once they go live, some more phone calls will be going to some various council members. And I just wanted to make sure that when you do get the phone calls, that to direct those individuals to call the City of Akron's engineering department and not our engineering department. I'm a little concerned about it. That industrial park, a lot of people leave like around 3:30, and then I think another set of them leave around 5. But the stop signs are there for east-west on Bath Road and then coming out of the industrial park. And even if you say it's needed for 4 hours a day, maybe from 2 to 6 p.m., and it is needed. I mean, if they're going to exit there, that is a dangerous place to exit without any stop signs there, with people coming, going both ways on Bath Road. So certainly we want to protect the people leaving that industrial park as well as the travelers on Bath Road. But 4 hours a day for 5 days a week, that's my opinion that it's going to be needed. There's 85+% hours in the week that it's not going to be needed. So I'm a little frustrated, and I say that without having spoken to anybody in Akron, and I don't know what amount of engineering they did to determine. And again, I think some type of traffic device is needed during those times when people are exiting. I mean, we want everyone to be safe, clearly. So I guess we see how it goes. And hopefully it won't be a disruption for too long of a period. I know Tony did inquire as to the length of time that they may be up and active, and I believe the answer was it could be 2 weeks or 2 months. They didn't really know. They're relying on the contractors to do the work. So I just wanted to throw that out there so everyone was aware. Certainly I'm getting calls because I live right here. Mr. Sams will probably be getting calls if he hasn't already, and maybe Jeff will get some calls too, and Russ being at large. So that's really all I have. I just wanted to make everyone aware of it. And I don't have any other information, but hopefully everything will work out and it won't last longer than necessary. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Gorbach. And Mr. Gorbach, I really appreciate you bringing this up, because when those signs went up, I had 5 calls immediately. So I think, a lot of Ward 5 people drive that way, myself included. And I think it's a horrible waste of gasoline to have to stop right there. And I do really hope that Akron changes their mind. And I totally agree with you that we do need to highlight that this is the city of Akron, although there's no designation of a border where that is, but that is Akron, and that's who people should be upset with.
Mr. Brillhart, Mr. President, I'd like to make a comment along those lines and follow up with what you and Mr. Gorbach have talked about.
Certainly.
I too have received emails and phone calls regarding this, and I think the concerns are well outlined by you and Mr. Gorbach. I've got one additional concern, that the stop signs remain after the work is done, and from what I've heard tonight, nobody can say definitively that they will go away. And I'm not so sure that Ascot Parkway and the businesses back there might enjoy that. And of course, if they stay, then it will be even worse. So, you know, I will ask the administration if there's any way they can find out if those are going to be permanent or permanent, excuse me, or temporary, or if there's any additional information, because I'm grateful for Mr. DeMasi getting back to Mr. Gorbaugh, but there's just not been a whole lot of communication, I think, from Akron to Cuyahoga Falls regarding this matter.
I can speak to that real quick, Mr. President. Mr. DeMasi was assured by the city of Akron that it will be temporary. And then once the work is completed, and I don't know what the word completed means, if that means everything in the park is done, or if just until they're able to get the state road entrance back working properly, but that they will come down once the work is completed as decided by Akron.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Calvecchio.
Thank you, Mr. Brillhart. Perhaps some of you all have seen the press release that went out announcing that our city received a National Endowment of the Arts grant for $50,000. And that was really good news for our city. Only about 3 of those have ever been received in the history of the entire county. So we're very excited about that. I had hoped that tonight I would have had the new ordinance in front of you for discussion on June 7th that would have allowed us to accept this grant, but we are still piecing together some of the contractual terms that'll go into that. We have to contract with a company that will serve as the project manager on that. We do have Arts Now, Nicole Mullet. Not sure if any of you know Nicole. She works with Arts Now. She's our advisory partner on this project. We still have to meet with her. We've had 1 meeting, but there's a lot to this and there's a lot of moving parts. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have it in the next packet, but I just didn't want 3 weeks to go by without making mention of it, since it had been announced in the press release. And this is that grant that will allow us to match the funds. And then we will be hosting a couple events down on the riverfront area. We've already selected 1 nationally known artist, Stacy Levy. She's an environmental artist. And she'll be coming to town and she'll be taking a look at that area near the river and putting together a piece of public art that is in celebration of the culture and the history of the river. And then we'll have another artist yet to be named who will be affiliated with a Native American tribe to do an additional piece of public art. And we're extremely happy that that person will also engage some of our local artists as part of that project and mentor them and show them some of their tricks of the trade, so to speak. So there's going to be a couple public events. There'll be new public art down on the riverfront. Our new public art board will assist in overseeing this project. It'll really be a great series of events for our city. So stay tuned.
Thank you. And I'll just comment on this. I'm so excited about this. I think this is just absolutely fabulous. And I so much appreciate all the work that you've done on this. I think it's just going to be absolutely fabulous for our city. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Brillhart. I did send out report 21 last Monday by email. So if anybody's had a chance to take a look at that, I'll share a few highlights. In the general fund revenue side, we continue to see fairly good numbers. Our property tax settlement this past April did have a sizable increase, as we did anticipate once we got some of the county's numbers in January. So that is a roughly about a 10% increase to our property tax value. So we'll see. It's kind of, property taxes are kind of odd a little bit. You would think you could just double them and you would get the number that you would get at the end of the year, but somehow that doesn't always happen. And so we tend to see a little fluctuation on the second half settlement. So, but we do anticipate about a 10% increase in our property tax revenues for 2021. It's been good to see a lot of the announcements out at Blossom 4 shows. And that was the one line item that we didn't get any revenue from last year. And so hopefully in July and into August, and I saw one big show even in the middle of October this year scheduled, and we'll see how those shows go. And we've been trying to keep up with all of them that have been scheduled at this point in time. Right now, I think I counted 15 to 18 shows that have been scheduled, and we normally see in the mid-20s. So it's good to see those coming back to life, and hopefully the public will feel safe and be vaccinated, and those will go off without a hitch. And the other line items in our shared local government funds, we're continuing to see strong numbers there, and we anticipate beating our budget number this year on those numbers. And then the main item that we talk about quite a bit is income tax, and that's on page 4. I will tell you, or I'm sorry, on page 5, at the top of page 5. We are continuing to see some very strong income tax numbers through April this year. We've been hesitant to move the needle thus far on what that revised budget number, what we anticipate seeing at the end of the year, because of the fluctuations we've had in individual filers this year. A couple reasons. One, last year the tax deadline was moved to June, or July, I'm sorry, and then this year was moved again to May. And so comparing year over year has just been very difficult with we were calling it ARPA dollars, the American Recovery Act dollars that the federal government has put out there. We did see a rush to file in February, and so we're waiting for some of those numbers to settle out. Withholding tax has been fairly strong over the first couple of months, and so that's been very good to see, and a good sign that the economy is starting to really come back. And in Cuyahoga Falls, it's coming back in a nice way. So we're seeing that. In the street construction maintenance repair fund, we're not quite seeing gasoline tax coming back. I don't think we're get as many miles on the roads as we saw pre-pandemic. So we don't anticipate seeing that, but I think we're getting more and more people starting to drive and use gasoline, and therefore the gasoline tax will start to come back. One area that got hit probably the hardest in the city it was the natatorium and the leisure time fund last year, as we had to shut things down. This year, we're starting to see some life, but not enough yet to see how quickly it's going to come back. I know that they've done a really nice job at the natatorium and the Park and Rec Department mitigating and doing all they can to keep members and people coming in during this time. But as things start to open up, we'll get a better sense on how quickly that'll come back, and where we might be into 2022. The golf course, Brookledge, and also Waterworks, on your report 21, you're going to see a pretty big number in 21 versus 2020, and that's just due to the shutdown. And you'll start to see that start to normalize as time goes on. At Waterworks this year, we hope not to have the same restrictions, and therefore we hope to see some better revenue numbers at that facility. But otherwise, have been fairly strong to date. I think people are just eager to get back to normal, and it's been good to see. The self-insurance fund, that fund, as we talked about last year and this year as well, our hospitalization and dental line item is down, and it's down roughly $400,000 from 2020. And 2020 was started. We didn't see quite a decrease in the costs or the decrease in the expenses in 2020. At this point in time, we were just kind of getting into the pandemic stuff. But we continue to see those costs for hospitalization and dental be down across the board. We still feel that that is very temporary, as individuals will start to have those elective surgeries and some other things. Those costs we anticipate going continue to normalize as we saw in 2019, and then in 2018 even. We'll start to see those numbers start to come back to normal. And in many cases, we want our employees to be as healthy as possible and to keep those costs down. And we want our employees to go to the doctor and get the care that they need so that they can continue to be able to work and provide value for the city. And also hopefully they're not staying home, and we're going to see huge increases to our insurance over the next several years because they didn't get the care that they needed through this pandemic. So we'll continue to keep a close eye on all those things. I did want to touch for just a quick minute on the American Recovery Act dollars, and it's no secret in the city of Cuyahoga Falls, we're going to see a little over $17 million in revenue. We have done all we need to do to receive those dollars. We do anticipate the first, they're calling them tranches, to be received soon. We've sent the paperwork in to do that. We were considered an entitlement city, and we will be able to get a direct deposit of those dollars. Guidance came out from the federal treasury a little over a week ago, and it describes some of the things we already kind of knew about the dollars, gave pretty broad uses of those dollars in the categories that are listed in the act itself. We've been mulling over those. I've sat on different webinars. I've talked to various other cities, and we're continuing to look at ways that we can use those dollars. So those will, more to come on that. I know the mayor has been involved with discussions with me on different items, but just wanted to let you all know that we hopefully will be seeing those dollars coming in. You'll see them on report 21, and I wanted to give you that information sooner than later, and that we will be talking about how and how we're going to be using those dollars here soon. So with that, Mr. President, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Any questions for Mr. Hoffman? I have one. Mr. Hoffman, how many of these tranches are there going to be, and are they going to be equally divided?
They are supposed to be. We are supposed to be getting two. Roughly half of the dollars will come this year, and then another half next year about this time. And we have until 2024 to be able to spend these dollars. And so we want to make sure that we do it right. We want to make sure that we don't just spend money to spend money, and that the city gets the best value and we invest properly into the city. So I don't want to rush and put something out that we're going to spend money in a certain way when it may not be the best way to do so.
Right. Mr. President, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. From what I'm hearing, tons of Zoom calls, obviously, with the state and the feds, and it looks like the revenue recovery portion, meaning if we were short, say, $5 million in our normal revenue, that's less restrictive to spend that amount. But then anything that's not revenue recovery is very restrictive. So we're still trying to get more guidance on that, exactly what that means. So it'll be, as time goes on, they're going to fine tune it a little bit more, but it's still quite vague. I know a couple of cities have put out statements on what they're going to do with the money. It's kind of hard to say at this point what you can do with the money. So we're going to be reserved. We're going to wait a little bit till we get more guidance, and then we'll involve all of you in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other business to come before council? I would just like to say one thing, actually, a shout out, and with the gratitude and appreciation to the mayor, the administration team, and Mr. Koenig for these Zoom meetings. I know this just all came about, and I think it's worked splendidly. And I kind of have mixed feelings, and maybe you do too. It's with excitement to get back together again and see everybody. But this sure worked very well, and I'm just so grateful to everyone that facilitated this. I was just thinking, at the beginning of the year in 2020, I never thought that in a couple months we were going to be on Zoom meetings and have all this going on, and everything that's been thrown on everybody. It's just the administration has done a wonderful job with this, and it's just I just every time we get on one of these meetings, I'm just very grateful that it all worked, and I think it's just been done very well, and hope that that's passed along to everyone.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All righty. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Say no. Well, have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you in
night.
person on the 7th.
Bye.
Signing off.
Good night, everybody.